Hey everybody, it's Olivia here from the Tennessee Conservative, here to bring you this week's Big 7 update. We have a lot of interesting stuff to dive into. The Speaker of the House is proposing to lower education requirements for teachers. We have a $165,000 remodel for the Metro Nashville Superintendent's personal office. Very interesting. The Shelby County GOP demanding accountability for their super liberal DA. Very interesting. But before we dive into all of that and more, I would just want to remind everybody, if you're not already, make sure that you sign up for our free daily e-newsletter delivered into your inbox every day without fail, chock full of interesting stories, news articles, ways for you to get involved, all sorts of things that you do not want to miss out on. So if you're not already subscribed, very easy. All you have to do is text NEWS, N-E-W-S, to 423-205-5600, and you will be good to go. Trust me, you do not want to miss out on everything going on right here in the volunteer state. Also remember, if you don't already, to follow us on all of the social media platforms. We're on X, Truth, Getter, Gab, Rumble, MeWe, Parler, Facebook. If it's out there, we're on it. So make sure you go like and subscribe to stay up to date with what is going on right here in Tennessee. But now let's dive into the fun stuff. So first on our list, Tennessee House Speaker proposes associate's degree program for K-6 teachers as a solution to the shortage problem. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that we're currently having a teacher shortage. I don't think that's news to anyone, but this is a very interesting proposal from Speaker of the House Cameron Sexton, who is a Republican, who thinks that his out-of-the-box idea could be a solution to this shortage issue. So public school teachers are currently required to have a bachelor's degree at minimum, and then they also must be enrolled in or have completed a preparation program for educators. What Cameron Sexton proposes to do is to bring the education requirement down from 4 years, which would be a bachelor's, to only 2 years of higher education as an associate. And then they also would be required to have an internship. And what exactly that looks like, I think they're still fleecing that out. But it'd be similar to how like a nursing program or maybe a doctor program works, where you complete the program and then they're an intern or a resident in that school for a determined amount of time. Interesting concept to lower the education standards for the people who are supposed to be educating the children. However, on the other hand, I think a lot of us have seen, particularly in the wake of the Charlie Kirk assassination, that maybe higher education isn't exactly all it's cracked up to be. So, very interesting idea. I can't say if I'm for or against it at this point, but I think it's it certainly is out of the box. We'll give him that one. So under this plan, passing the praxis exam would still be required. But here's what I think is interesting. Only 67% of potential elementary teachers with a bachelor's degree pass the praxis when taking it for the first time. 67%. That's not even a C. That's not even a middle grade. So that's already the pass rate, or really the fail rate, I guess we could say, with a bachelor's degree requirement. Now, Sexton thinks that those with associate's degree in education would have similar or maybe even better pass rates. And I don't think I don't know, based on what he's saying that or what data, not sure. But again, interesting idea. Interesting, very interesting. He says his plan may draw people to teaching who cannot afford a 4-year degree, including retirees. So the idea maybe to get some of these retirees back in the classroom to help teach, to be able to supplement, do those sorts of things. Envisioning a system similar to nursing, Sexton would not require participants in the new associate's degree program to later earn their bachelor's, but he feels confident that many of them would. Maybe, maybe not. I think it depends on the retention. It depends on the pay. It depends on if there's, pay scale levels, depending on all of that. So very interesting. That'll be interesting to watch during the 2026 legislative session, which will start in January, getting close to that. So unusual proposal from the speaker. I'm not sold, but I'm also not sold. So we'll see how that all shakes out as we get more details. Next up, the Shelby County GOP requests federal accountability for their Democrat district attorney. So obviously, I think we've all been watching the success of the Memphis task force. They're at over 2,000 arrests, recovery of 93 children, arrest after arrest after arrest of gang members, illegal immigrants, all sorts of things. So the success of the actual boots on the ground task force, I think, is undisputed by anyone who's actually paying attention or isn't just completely overcome with Trump derangement syndrome. If you are a normal person looking at, is the task force making steps to make our community better? The answer is a resounding yes. But the problem is, all of these arrests have to be charged and prosecuted. And who's in charge of doing that? That would be your local district attorney. And the district attorney in Shelby County, I have to say, is definitely not a friend to anyone who is in favor of law and order. So what the Shelby County GOP did was unanimously pass a resolution urging the federal government to implement oversight and tracking mechanisms for arrests made under the Memphis Safe Task Force to prevent potential undermining of the task force's successes by local prosecutorial leniency, particularly from Soros-backed, shocker, Shelby County District Attorney Steve Mulroy. And Mulroy has been a problem for a long time. There's quite a bit that we've covered about him. Extremely controversial. He's been criticized for left-wing policies, including participation in restorative justice schemes aiming to eliminate cash bail. He even entered into an agreement with the Biden-era Department of Justice to not prosecute those who knowingly spread HIV, like aggravated prostitution, I think it's called, something like that. So this is the kind of guy who is in charge of deciding whether or not these people arrested by the task force will even be charged with a crime, or even if they are, he can downgrade those charges, he can dismiss, he can do all of that, many times of which he has. With similar operations, I believe it was Operation Viper over the summer, half of those were dismissed like within 48 hours. So not a great prosecution track record from Mulroy. So the resolution from the GOP is asking for anyone, really federal, more than just even local, but they're going ahead and going for federal oversight to monitor the prosecution outcomes, plea deal sentencing, and recidivism rates, to hold the offenders accountable and maximize the task force's long-term impact on public safety. I think that's a really great thing they did. I think that's a really powerful statement to say, hey, not only are we seeing the results from the task force, but that's all useless if we don't actually prosecute these offenders, right? There's no point. So really strong words from the Shelby County GOP. At a more local level, Senator Brent Taylor, who has also spent quite a bit of time really trying to hold Mulroy and other both judges and district attorneys like him accountable, has filed, I believe it's the Memphis Safe Task Force Accountability Act, something like that. But he has filed that, which would require any DA, if they're prosecuting a felony in any jurisdiction that the task force is operating in, basically to report to the legislator and justify if they enter into a plea deal, if they downgrade the charges, or if they dismiss any of those charges. So there theoretically is an accountability factor there. They can't just dismiss everything for no reason without trying to give some sort of accountability and justify why they should or should not be allowed to do that. So that'll be another interesting piece of legislation to keep our eyes on as the 2026 session gets going. Next up, the U.S. Secretary of War is sending additional lawyers to aid the Department of Justice in Memphis as part of the Memphis Safe Task Force. So Secretary of War Pete Hegseth ordered the military to send dozens of lawyers to the Justice Department for temporary assignment in Memphis to help aid in immigration efforts being undertaken by the task force. So basically, he asked for lawyers also in New Mexico, I believe, and Texas along the border states, but specifically sending 20 of those lawyers to Memphis to help expedite proceedings and judicial proceedings. So the memo did not completely specify what duties or what roles those lawyers might fill, but the ask said that those ideally would be trained in immigration law. So I think we have a pretty good idea, general prosecution and immigration law. So a pretty good idea of how they're going to be functioning. And also it would make sense given that last month the Pentagon also approved sending up to 600 military lawyers to the DOJ to serve specifically as temporary immigration judges as a boost to help accelerate the deportation process. So not surprising, but I think that's really great. There's some of that federal help as part of this task force to continue and try and not only arrest the criminals, but then to get them off the streets permanently, deport them. Bye, you've got to go. You don't belong here, right? So really great move from Hegseth. Glad he's paying attention. He is a Sumner County resident, in case anybody did not know that. So he is a Tennessee boy. He also notified Governor Bill Lee in a letter, I believe in September, that the Department of Defense or Department of War is prepared to authorize and fund up to 1,000 Tennessee National Guard personnel to work with the Memphis Safe Task Force through September of 2026, next year. And same for these temporary lawyers. They could potentially be assigned. They were told to be prepared to be assigned through fall of next year. So obviously, federally, The task force is looking at being more of a long-term solution. Governor Bill Lee has said that he definitely could see this being an ongoing thing. I don't think, again, any rational civilian would have any objection to that. But again, obviously, the federal component is looking at this as a continuous effort and an ongoing effort. So I think that's really great that it's not just a flash in the pan kind of thing, make a little noise, splash, and get out. So there's going to be a concerted effort, I think, to continue chipping away at Memphis, and hopefully that will have rippling effects throughout the rest of the state. Now we'll see as far as the National Guard deployment goes that because of the lawsuit filed by Shelby County Mayor Lee Harris and several other Memphis area Democrats challenging the deployment of the National Guard, who, by the way, aren't, to my knowledge, carrying arms or doing patrol. They're doing more administrative and support work. But apparently that's just a step too far for these people. So we'll see how that goes as far as the deployment is good. But good to know we have the backing of the Secretary of War. Very helpful. Good thing. Let's see. Next on the list. This, I think, is my favorite story of the week, only because it's so outrageous. Metro Nashville Public School Superintendent's Office gets $165,000 remodel, all on the taxpayer's dime. I had hoped I was reading a satire headline, maybe like a Babylon Bee thing when I saw this, but that is not true. It is all true. It is not satire. So amidst budget concerns, which has been a big deal, it was a big deal in the passing of the Nashville city budget this last year, and skyrocketing property taxes, and that's shocking what's going on with some of that. The superintendent for Metro Nashville Public Schools just had an office suite makeover totaling nearly $165,000, which is, of course, all your taxpayer dollars. All on the taxpayer's dime. She did not pay for any of this herself. The suite renovation included demolishing the old offices and installing new walls, lights, ductwork, plumbing, and carpeting for the office, conference room, and storage areas. Now, I'm not saying that things don't need to be renovated or upkeep. That's important. But all of that for an office suite. But here's the kicker. The most expensive and biggest renovation was the addition of a private bathroom only accessible through the superintendent's private office, despite there being a woman's bathroom literally right outside the superintendent's office door. So obviously, Superintendent Adrienne Battle cannot go to the bathroom with the rest of us commoners because that would just be too much. She doesn't like the fact that hundreds of people use that bathroom. So obviously she needed her own to be more productive. That was her justification for that. Obviously, parents are rightfully incensed. They say that this is not a good look for the district. The optics are terrible. Yes, of course. And I think there's some interesting ideas about there needs to be accountability from the school board because they're the ones that approved the expenses. And I don't believe, if I understood this situation correctly, this was necessarily a one-time $165,000 check to do all of it, but it was a series of expenditures over time, but all of them had to be approved by the school board. So I guess we can't really be mad at a Superintendent Battle for taking advantage of a school board that wants to sign blank checks, I guess. They, of course, justified it and said that it's a modest renovation because the school's budget is so big. 165 it really is a drop in the bucket, all things considered. But you also have to take into consideration that this is the district that also just recently settled a $6.5 million lawsuit with 5 former administrators who actually claimed retaliation by the same superintendent. So there's just been a lot of questions about the priorities, obviously, of the city and of the district in their funding and where we're putting money and what kind of spending habits is this district going to, which, by the way, the school's budget makes up approximately 38% of the entire city budget, which is over $3 billion. So apparently, even though it's 38%, your property taxes still need to go up because we have to pay for office renovations. So that's where your money's going in Nashville. I think if you paid for it, maybe some people should be entitled to use that other bathroom. But yeah, that was wild to me. And the fact that the superintendent can justify it and just say, no, it was modest and I need it for productivity reasons. It'll make me more productive. What else is there to say? But holy cow.
Guys, go to TennesseeConservativeNews.com. Hit the support button. We need your donations. Boy, this has been a rough summer. I ain't going to lie to you. Trump complacency syndrome is in full effect. Don't think because we've got somebody decent in the White House that it somehow trickles down into state and local government. Boy, it doesn't. We report story after story that completely contradicts that. So you can also mail your checks to P.O. Box 625, Signal Mountain, Tennessee 37377. And if you should give a donation of $50 or more, or a recurring donation of $10 or more, we'll send you a proud Tennessee conservative tumbler, a koozie, our heartfelt thanks, and a directory of your elected officials for those that have ears to hear and eyes to see.
All right, moving right along here. Former Tennessee lawmaker appeals to President Trump for pardon, saying she was unfairly targeted for prosecution. All right, so this lawmaker she's a former legislator herself. Robin Smith is appealing to President Trump for a pardon to help her avoid the 8-month prison sentence she received at the end of October, saying that she was unduly prosecuted and unfairly targeted for prosecution because she has spent decades being a political grassroots conservative and advocating for all sorts of conservative and grassroots movement. So she thinks that President Trump will understand her plight. So this conviction or this sentencing obviously was part of the Speaker of the House, Glenn Casada, and Cade Cothran kickback scandal, where they basically created a fake company and then laundered taxpayer money through it to line their own pockets. Surprise. Sentencing for Smith was delayed over 2 years in order for her to testify against Speaker Glenn Casada. So she struck a plea deal, and then sentencing was delayed, and then she had to pay a bunch of fines. And then she'll pay another fine once she's released from incarceration. But she feels that this all means that she's been unfairly prosecuted. So she's going to go ahead and ask for a pardon from President Trump, because obviously this is the same as being shot at in a public rally. So basically, I mean, there's $28,000 judgment, and there's a lot of this and that, and I was unfairly targeted and lawfare, but what it boils down to is she did plead guilty to the charge of conspiracy, but believes she's entitled to a pardon because ultimately, even though she participated in this kickback scheme, is somehow on the right side of things. So you can make up your own mind about that, but I think that's highly amusing, and also kind of sad, but that's all right. All right, what else do we got here? Yes, possible Volkswagen Chattanooga strike. Workers at Volkswagen Chattanooga who do not want to strike can continue working per the National Right to Work Legal Defense Fund. So sides seem to be lining up. There might be a potential strike at the Chattanooga Volkswagen plant, which employs roughly 4,500 people, give or take. So a strike would be challenging. There's obviously the EV market is volatile and is slowing down. So they're saying, hey, we don't know if we can guarantee jobs. We may have to do layoffs. The union doesn't care for that. So there's potentially a strike coming up pretty soon. The United Auto Workers Union announced last week that majority of its members had agreed to strike, accusing Volkswagen of unfair labor practices. What that means specifically, I don't know. That's their claim, their justification for striking. They also don't care that the automaker did not add language in its proposal that includes job security if there are plant closures or outsourcing if the plant is closed. So they're also trying to make sure that obviously employees will have jobs should plants close, do this, do that. Again, a lot of volatility in the market right now with what's going on there. I think Ford as well, another one based in Tennessee, I can't remember which one, also rolling back their plans to roll out some of their EVs and components and things like that. So if there's not production or demand, there's really no need to have production, obviously, but that affects more than just the company. So National Right to Work Legal Defense Fund said employees do not have to belong to the union, which could fine members who work during a strike. Tennessee has right to work protections that allow workers to stop paying union dues without fear of losing their jobs. So I think particularly in a time where things are really uncertain, that's probably a good thing. So you can continue to work even if you don't want to be a part of the union, just to continue to put food on the table if you don't want to strike. They also said, the president said, despite fear-mongering, pressure tactics, and misleading statements from union officials, workers always have the right to continue to work during a strike, providing for their families. So that's important. We obviously want that to happen. We'll see how that shakes out in the next couple weeks, probably. See if there's any motion on that. And finally, our number 7 story in the Big 7, Tennessee children with extra support needs are placed in DCS offices instead of with families. This is shocking to me. Not so much in the sense that it's happening, but just the unwillingness of the department to really, quite frankly, deny that they're having problems. So they just kind of saying everything's fine and we're getting better, and you've got children sleeping in office buildings because they say they can't find houses for them because these children need more care or have different needs than the regular foster system. So last week, 10 children with extra support needs in custody of the Department of Children's Services were placed in DCS offices instead of with families or in an appropriate facility. Not only are they not putting them in homes, they're not even able to put them in facilities, special facilities that cater to their additional needs, whatever those might be. Now, this isn't a new development, which I think is part of the shocking part to me. This practice has been going on at least 4 years, at least when it was brought to the attention of the public. It may have been going on for longer than that. Reasonably met with outrage from the public and legislature, sure. We should all be outraged at that. But despite promises to put an end to children having to sleep in offices instead of homes and extra funding from the state, you asked for more money to fix the problem, the practice persists. So more money, zero effort to fix the issue. The department commissioner, Margie Quinn, insists that children staying in the offices are receiving similar care to other children taken into state custody, but that those with juvenile violations or with higher medical and behavioral needs take longer to assess for appropriate placement. Now, I think there's some legitimacy to that in the sense of you need to make sure that a child who has extra needs is put into a home equipped to deal with them. That's fair. But I don't think saying that you have to house children in office buildings because there are no families willing to take them or willing to meet, or how hard are you really looking to find families, I guess is the question. And I believe there's maybe some hypocrisy going on here. I believe it's in Tennessee. Maybe not, but there's a family who had one of those more special needs children, developmental or disabilities, those kinds of things. They took him to a psychiatric facility all under the DCS protocol and things like that. And the facility would not re-release the child back into the care of the family, despite them saying, yes, we're ready for him to come home. We're ready to deal with this. We've gotten help. We're getting him help. We're doing all of that. So you're saying on one hand that you don't have enough families to take care of these more needy children, but then on the other hand, you're denying them from families that are willing to take them. So some things just not adding up here. It's a little bit fishy. Again, according to the department, while at the office, the children are provided with daily showers, taken to school. They see behavioral health specialists, are overseen by case managers, sometimes with security in addition. So DCS is working to open specialized facilities designed to take children with higher support needs, but no exact date for when the expansion of treatment capacity will begin operations and make office placements a thing of the past. So once again, you asked for more money to take care of this problem and you've made zero headway on actually solving it. That's pretty outrageous to me. Quinn believes that it's unfortunate that these children and youths are not placed in a home-like environment, but that it's only a small number of minors that are affected. So it's fine because it's just a few. Now, I guess the good news is they've gone from sleeping on floors with blankets and airplane pillows to actually having cots, and they've converted some rooms and things like that. But again, not really sure how you can say we need more money. If we just had more money, we could fix the problem, and then not do anything to fix the problem. When lawmakers asked for data during their meeting on the number of minors having to stay in offices, it was not made available immediately. So it's just a small number, but we don't really know how many. Okay. One lawmaker also wants to know how many sexual assaults have taken place in the offices. Not a surprise, again, that data wasn't readily available. That, I think, is a tragedy. Again, what's happening to children is the responsibility of everyone because they need us to advocate for them. So it will be interesting to see if the legislature takes any action on this or tries to force anything to get this rolling, because I think this is easily a bipartisan issue. No matter what side of the aisle you stand on, children sleeping in offices because the department isn't taking care of them appropriately is a challenge. So hopefully we can all join hands and actually get something productive accomplished on that end. And that, everyone, is the Big 7 for this week. So thanks again for hanging in there for the ride. Like I said before, make sure you subscribe to our free daily e-newsletter if you haven't already. Follow us on all the socials. And if you have it in your heart to support us financially, we will always accept that as well. We do our best to make sure that we are staying not tied to the money to make sure that we can be independently operated so that we can bring you the real, true, unfiltered version of what is happening in Tennessee and do our best to play a part in the grassroots activism that we all are a part of. So thank you guys so much. We appreciate you, each and every one of our listeners, each and every one of our followers. You all are a blessing. Have a great weekend, and we will see you Monday in your inbox.